All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Hi, thank you for joining us for this really special panel celebrating International Women's Day today. International Women's Day is something that's always been really important to myself as we celebrate the social, cultural, economic achievements of women. And I've assembled with me today this fantastic panel of women to celebrate women in film. So today I have Nikki, Bridget, Hannah, and Melissa. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to kick it off. The first prompt we're going to talk about today is to celebrate a woman in film. So women involved in producing films. So an actress, a writer, a director, costume designer, editor, anyone that has been involved in the filmmaking process. And I'm going to start today, and I really want to highlight a name that I didn't know until only the first few years. I'm a big Disney fan. So this lady is really prolific for the 1950s, 60s especially, and that is Mary Blair. Mary Blair was an animator in a time where we know it was really hard to be a woman in this field. We have seen the viral no-go-round on the Snow White stationery about like women weren't allowed to be part of the process. You could be maybe a part of like the ink and paint, but to actually be accredited woman on film and be a lead concept designer was something she really did end up blazing a trail for. In the film Saludos Amigos, they do a cultural exchange trip to South America, and she's part of that trip, and you see her get on the plane and do the sketches and just be a voice and a part of it. And Alice in Wonderland is my all-time most favorite film, and so to see her sketches, her concept art, to know that she is at the forefront of all that whimsy that's just influenced me throughout my life. We ended up going to a museum recently, and they had a big Alice in Wonderland display, and they had her framed concept designs of the red rose and of Alice with all the different signposts and the told you woods. And just this woman was just so incredibly talented and deserves the recognition, because I don't think it's a household name, but it's a name that deserves to be seen. There's a fantastic book called Queens of Animation that really does tell these women's stories, and Mary Blair is just one of those ones where it's like, wow, this woman has had a really big influence on my childhood and my love of film that I just hadn't heard about her before. Bridget, what are your thoughts on Mary Blair?
I also didn't know about her until fairly recently, and she's just such a fascinating person. I was like looking into her a little bit more, like with this panel coming up, and I discovered that she went to college. Like she went and got a college education at like a renowned university in California, and that's just not something that a lot of women did in the 1920s and 30s. That just wasn't something that happened. So she was not only like an incredible artist, she was also a college educated woman in a time where that wasn't really like popular. And she just had such an impact on the world of animation, especially Disney animation, which really was groundbreaking in terms of animation. And it really wouldn't be anywhere near what it is now without her. And I feel like not enough people know her name. And that's such a shame.
Absolutely agree. Like those 50s, because we know coming out of World War II, like the studio's in a bit of disarray. So it's the hits of Cinderella. I know Alice in Wonderland wasn't a commercial success, but it's still, that design was so strong. Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, Just Sleeping Beauty. This is what's really saved the studio at the time, and like her design is a big part of that. So absolutely. Nikki, would you like to tell us about the woman in film that you would like to highlight today?
Okay, so staying on the Disney trend. So when I made this pitch in the chat, anyone, especially Kelly and Hannah, know that my pick was very on brand for me. So kind of staying on the animation bandwagon. I decided to go with maybe a less conventional pick and definitely more recent up-and-comer with Domi Shi, who, for those who aren't familiar with the name, is the Oscar-winning director of the short film Bao and of what is now probably pretty easily in my top 10 Pixar films of all time, Turning Red. So for a little bit about her background, she's a Canadian filmmaker who worked on storyboarding for several Pixar films in the mid-late 2010s, and then began working on Bao as an original short. And I really love this story that I read about while she was developing it. Pete Docter, current chief creative officer at Pixar and director of many of their fabulous films, mentored her like as she was creating it. And for anyone who's seen Bao, it's a little unorthodox in the way the story is told. And he was super supportive of that. But there were others at the studio who were like kind of told her like, hey, maybe tone this down a bit. And then when she pitched her revisions to him, he's like, what's this? And she's like, oh, like I decided to make some changes. And he like was very supportive, like, no, go with your original vision. Like, don't be afraid to be weird with it. And I think Bao is all the better for it. I just rewatched it before this. There's a lot, for those who know, she is also a woman of Asian descent. And a lot of that is influential in her work. And a lot of the themes that she has with family, with kind of the cultural differences of children who grow up in these very cultural homes. It's very prevalent in Bao. And for anyone who's seen Turning Red, that is literally the plot of Turning Red. But what's so great about them to me is that even though they have like this cultural stamp on them, the themes are still very universal. Like, I'll keep this, I think this is a funny story, I'll keep it short. I have a friend who is mid-30s white man who was like, I have a friend group, and he like was very insistent on like all the movies we should all watch together. And I have another friend who's like, okay, you gotta stop this. I'm picking a movie now. It's gonna be Turning Red, which of course he was like hesitant about, even though he's seen most Pixar movies. We watch it. He is immediately laughing his ass off. Like, it hit with him. And at the end of the year, he said like, okay, this is my 5th favorite film of 2022. And I was like, yes, we did it. And then like just briefly talk about the animation. What's so interesting about it is the character design. Like it's very whimsical. Like the proportions are weird. Like people's heads are weird shapes, but there's like this sense of realism at the same time. Like even just rewatching Bao, like the textures, I mean, the food porn, how can you like not deny the food porn in both of those shorts? But like, those are realistic. Like Domichi even said like, hey, I have moles. May should have moles. Like this sense of realism at the same time. And I think that's very thoughtful and has kind of lent itself to a very, especially even for Pixar, original vision and animation style. So I'm very excited for what's going to come. I know Turning Red is not going to win the Oscar because Pinocchio exists, but I still love the movie, and I'm very excited to see what else she does. And I can't believe I missed this over. Also, first woman to solo direct a Pixar film, which is an amazing achievement itself. And I'm excited for what else they have to do. I love what the direction they've been going in, and I'm excited for it. And she, I think, has been a big part of that.
I loved this choice so much as soon as you dropped it. I'm like, this makes so much sense, and this is great. And as you said, excited to see what she's going to do, because we've already had Bao, which, yeah, when she ate the Bao, like I remember sitting in the theater, my mind's like, and I don't get that very often where I have a literal jaw drop moment, but that happened. So, and then Turning Red, that is, I like what you're saying. It's such a lived experience. This was someone's childhood experience, and I related to it. Being that tween awkward girl and your celebrity boy crushes and things like that. And then just having the balls to put in sanitary pads and things like that. I loved that. It's something so small, but it's so needed. We need to be able to normalize these things and celebrate it, because it's what every woman goes through. So why shouldn't it be on film? So I love this choice, and where she's hopefully going to be heading with it next is just going to be so interesting. Hannah, what do you think about Domichi?
Yeah, I loved this pick. I love Turning Red so much. It was one that I watched everybody. I was 15 in 2002, and so everybody from my age group, all the girls were like, "Oh yeah, this just was our childhood." So it was so instantly relatable. Even for those of us who did not transform into red pandas, and have an ancient family curse. But what I really love that this is another example of getting a really, really great broad perspective on women in film and on the kinds of stories they're telling, because the kind of story that Domichi is telling is not the same as the story Marie Blair is telling. It's not the same story as the one I'm telling. And my woman in film. And that's so important because for such a long time, there was just this is the women's experience. And that left out the Asian American women, and that left out the women in tech, and that left out everyone who didn't conform to this little piece. And so we have these now beautifully specific stories being told about these really specific life experiences living in Toronto with a Chinese Canadian family in 2000, and being a Blend fan, and having this all pulled together. And somehow it comes together because it's so specific and so authentic to it clearly comes out of her soul and comes from her life and her heart and her love. And that makes it instantly more universal than if they had tried to sit down and be like, okay, what do teenage girls from 2002 like? Like, it's clearly just her, and being like, this was my life. And everybody, all the women in my generation are like, so that was me too. And it's just, it's beautiful to see that kind of specificity and, like you said, lived experience really getting a chance to be shown. And even where we, may have different cultural connections, those universal emotions and feelings and senses of belonging and of feeling uncomfortable and awkward are all there, and they come through so clearly in Dong Shi's work.
We picked our favorite boy band member, like you had a favorite NSYNC or a favorite Backstreet Boys member, and like just goofing around with your friends. I just loved to see that, just those simple moments like that, just singing lyrics together was great. Bridget, what woman in film would you like to highlight today?
So today I'm going to be talking about, this was such a hard choice to make. Such a hard choice. But I had to go with Nora Ephron. She was the first person I can recall watching a movie and seeing the titles scrolling across the film and seeing directed by a woman. Women can do that? Oh gosh, it was the first time I'd ever remembered, and it was You've Got Mail, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. I love that movie. I can rewatch it whenever I want, and it still hits exactly the same. And it's just, she's written so many incredible things. She's got some of the most iconic rom-coms under her belt as a writer, a producer, and a director, and just so many incredible things. And the thing that I like most about what she writes is that in many ways it feels like a fairy tale, but it still feels realistic. It feels like a realistic fairy tale. Because You've Got Mail, that's so many coincidences, but they're plausible. And I just think that she's done so many incredible things, and that she was taken from us far too soon. And everything I've seen that she's been a part of has just been absolutely incredible to me.
Oh yes, You've Got Mail. I just rewatched Sleepless in Seattle as well. When
So
Harry
good.
Met Sally. That's a big trilogy just there. They are all-time classics.
The ultimate
and they'll
trilogy
never go out of
rom-com.
style. Exactly. Yeah. They'll never go out of style. You can watch You've Got Mail today. Okay, we don't have AOL anymore, but the emotions, the experience is all still there. Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks just sing her dialogue, especially. And I like what you said about realistic fairy tale, because watching Sleepless in Seattle, bit of a creepy stalker vibe when I watch it nowadays, but I get swept up in it. Yes, these people are meant for each other, even though they've never met. And she's only heard him on the radio. And I was listening to a podcast about Sleepless in Seattle, and they brought up the point that Nora Ephron writes the most amicable breakup scenes you've ever seen. It's the person that they're not meant to be with is just we're not meant for each other. Good day to you, sir, and a good day to you.
I think about the breakup scene between Meg Ryan and oh gosh, what's his name? The boy that
Kinnear. Yes, Greg Kinnear.
Yeah,
yes.
I think about their breakup scene all the time, all the time, rent free in my head. The fact that they're immediately
I'm not in love with you either.
And that's it. And then they're talking about their friends, and it's what? That's awesome. What? I love it.
It can be like that. Absolutely.
It's crazy. I love it.
Melissa, what are your thoughts on Nora Ephron?
I mean, I think she invented the 90s rom-com, at this point. She's just, and as we kind of know these days, the rom-com is a kind of a dying genre. I am praying for some good rom-coms to come out in the next few years, because I miss it. I think she's an incredible director, incredible writer. I think she uses humor really well. I think that's why a lot of her films are I would say, quote unquote, timeless, like you said. Like, there's kind of maybe problematic things a little bit, but you know what? I don't care. I do get swept up in, the romance, but then she has really good, sorry, my cat, really good, like, comedic writing, I feel, in her work. And yeah, I think she was gone way too soon, and I would have loved to see what she would have done if she was still around. But yeah, love her films. Specifically, When Harry Met Sally is probably my favorite of her work.
So good. I like what you're saying about like the comedy, because I think she worked really a lot with the actors and with other people. And I think I saw it described as like a friend. You know, Meg Ryan and Carrie Fisher will say Nora Ephron was a great friend. And I think that's something that also just really comes through in the writing and in that dialogue. Hannah, what do you think about Nora Ephron?
Yeah, there's actually, as I was picking my own choice, Nora Ephron was one that came to mind as well. And I also chose a writer director. So, but Nora Ephron has, with her view on these rom-coms, she really taps into something that I think is very true for a lot of women in relationships that doesn't get as much attention until she came along, which was how much joy and flirtation and love and intimacy can be found in these little joking moments between friends and potential love interests. And she was so good at writing those that, When Harry Met Sally, we could feel the build, even though they were not, overtly flirting with each other until much later in the story. Like, they're just friends, being friends, joking with each other. And she really picks up on like how sexy that is to be able to have somebody who you can just like joke around with and have these silly little bits that you just play off of each other. And she captures that so beautifully. And she really has, like, she's able to pull that chemistry out of them in a way that that is very unusual to find, especially in a lot of rom-coms where like there's this perception of like, it's gonna look like this. And she takes it and just makes them so small and intimate and real and funny, and captures, like, I fall in love with her characters every time I watch her movies. I'm just like, oh, this is beautiful.
Absolutely. Nikki, what are your thoughts on Nora Ephron?
I mean, I'll keep it brief because like I can't possibly be more eloquent than everyone else has been, but just like, and like y'all hit the nail on the head, especially like the dialogue can't be overstated. Like I only watched When Harry Met Sally for the first time like less than a year ago, and I watched it at my parents', and my dad is like, oh, there's so much talking, like this is boring. I was like, that's how you know it's compelling, when they make average ass conversations like that engaging. And then another one that like for me, because I have some nostalgia for it, and it's not her strongest work, but like I have a huge soft spot for Julie and Julia. And like, I know a lot of people are down about the Julie scenes, but I still think she pulls out, first of all, great performances from everyone. And even like I don't know how accurate it is to Julia, to both these women, but like Julia Child, and of course, largely because Meryl Streep, like they're so charming, like, and she's able to make it so lighthearted while also tying in like the sadder subplots like her infertility, and of course, just I can't get over food porn. That's like my theme tonight. But no, like even like something like that might be like a lesser movie, I still think is still fantastic to watch though. And I think that just, again, speaks highly of the way she can write dialogue and these scenes. And again, it feels natural, but they still have like a very special charm to them that I appreciate.
Great. Hannah, who would you like to highlight tonight?
Yeah, so I went with a writer director as well. I went with Nicole Holofcener, who is a little bit off the beaten path, maybe. A lot of folks have not seen her work. I first discovered her what was the first one I saw? I think the first one I saw was Lovely and Amazing. She has another one from the same decade called Walking and Talking. And she did mostly these little indie dramas, sort of what Nora Ephron did with rom-coms. Nicole Holofcener was doing a lot with dramas. And they share a lot of similar traits in that she absolutely knows how to bring these characters to life in a way that I'm just like, they're very talky movies. They're very like sit and talk and let's hear about your life and this is what's going on with me, but they're so compelling. And she partners a lot. She works a lot with Catherine Keener, who I also debated for this, who is just makes everything she's in better. And she and Holofcener are such a beautiful pairing because they both I find that Holofcener writes women in a way that they don't get to be written. She writes them as complicated, and she writes them as flawed, and she writes them as having a whole bunch of different facets that that can't easily be distilled down. A lot of times, I often had a difficult time finding women to relate to in film because they would have, one or two character traits. And so the closest I could get was like, okay, I'm going to go with the nerdy ones, even though, maybe their personality was completely different from mine. And I love that Nicole Holofcener writes these characters who are who have so much going on. The other one that probably people most know her from is she was the co-writer for Can You Ever Forgive Me with Melissa McCarthy, which again she's such an amazingly interesting woman to watch, this character. And like you want to watch, and she's as compelling as any of these male characters who get written about, who get these giant stories told about them. And then she was involved in writing The Last Duel, and specifically in the, to my understanding, really heavily involved in the part of telling the woman's side of the story, which again, I found the most compelling of all of them, because she really found a way to really bring out the multifaceted nature of these women characters. They felt real. They felt plausible. They felt like people who I wanted to sit down and talk to and get to know better. And she's apparently got something coming out this year, and I'm super excited. And her discography or filmography is fairly short. I want to go back and watch all of them, because every time I sit down and watch one of her movies, I'm just like, this is so good. And so it's like sitting down. It's cozy, but in like a dramatic way. It's like she really, Nora Ephron and Holofcener are kind of an interesting pair, because if you want to laugh, if you want to be like, you've got these two sides. But yeah, I love her work, and she doesn't get a lot of attention. We don't have a lot of female writer directors until fairly recently really getting a lot of traction. And so I'm always happy to highlight any of the ones who I think need more people to see their stuff.
This is a name I definitely was not familiar with, but then when I looked at that filmography, I think it's Enough Said as well.
Yes, yeah.
Enough Said. Saying that, and then when I saw Can You Ever Forgive Me, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. That really did make a lot of sense. And I know there was a bit of turbulence on that set regarding that, but that just makes it more interesting, because as you're saying, she's writing these complicated, possibly flawed women, and I do like it's hard to do that sometimes, and we're still only just getting comfortable in seeing that, but it makes it more relatable. It makes me not look at these pretty perfect women on the screen and be like, well, do I have to be like that, or do I have to act like that? As you're saying, like being different faceted. It's just
and
great.
she writes these women with such empathy for them. A lot of times you get some of the other films that I fell in love with, they have characters who are cheating on their husbands, and that's a horrible thing to do, but like she writes these characters so that you may be like, oh, that's a terrible choice they're making, but you care about them and you want them to be okay. And a lot of times flawed women get written in such a villainized way, even sometimes, but in any movie, sometimes that just happens. And so I really love that they get the space to breathe in their villainy or in their flaws and continue to be compelling and interesting to watch. And like, I want to pick their brains.
Nikki, what do you think about Nicole Holofcener?
I'm kind of in the same boat, where when Hannah first said her name, I certainly wasn't familiar with her until I, of course, look at the filmography. It's like, oh, snap. Because I had mentioned it before, but Can You Ever Forgive Me? Like, it was a late entry to my top films of 2018. Like, I had heard great things about it, but I was shocked by how blown away I was. I mean, firstly, she wrote a role that Melissa McCarthy was fantastic in, that wasn't a dumb comedy. And I feel bad because I want to take a shot because Melissa McCarthy is super talented, but like that was amazing. Like the way she portrayed Lee, and of course, oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. Richard, what's his name? Yes. Oh my God. Who's like everything, like, because that movie, I don't want to say the word gritty, because it's like, I feel like that has certain connotations to it, but like, again, there's that sense of realism, the sense of like way less than perfection, because Lee is very deeply flawed and unpleasant person, but she's still so compelling. And like, I gave a shit about that storyline. And then The Last Duel. And again, when you have Jodie Comer, how could it not be great? But I think that just speaks to the potency of when you kind of have that perfect melding of like all the elements, like the writing, the directing, the acting. And like I think writing in general is like something a lot of people probably overlook in terms of the importance of it to a filmmaking process. Like you don't like it took me years, and then I realized, wait, like someone can win the writing Oscar even if they don't win the Best Picture Oscar. Yeah, because that's a very important singular element of a film. So for that, like all the appreciation in the world.
Fantastic. Melissa, who would you like to highlight this evening?
Well, I just want to say it was impossible to try to choose somebody. So I kind of just went with a recency bias for myself, which I chose Edith Head. I'm sure everyone in this group is familiar with the Pixar character Edna Mode. And that is who Edna Mode is based off of, is Edith Head. And I feel like Edna Mode is more popular than Edith Head. And I don't know if that's right, but that's okay. She is probably the most influential and like important costume designer in cinema history. So the recency bias was I recently watched What a Way to Go, starring the incredible Shirley MacLaine. I can't recommend it enough if you have not seen it. But my jaw was like on the floor with some of these costumes that I was seeing in this film. And I was like, okay, I got to investigate who was behind this. And so I did a little bit of a deep dive on Edith Head. I feel like I've maybe have heard of her throughout the years, but not to the degree that I kind of do now. But I guess just to kind of talk about her, she worked at Paramount for over 40 years doing costume work. And then she worked at Universal for over 10 years. So she had like a 50-year costume design career, which I think is incredible. And I feel like I don't hear about her nearly enough than I feel like we should. She also worked a lot with Alfred Hitchcock, worked with a lot of like, well-known classic actresses and actors. She was she was nominated several times at the Oscars. Not that that really matters, but that's cool. She won a few times as well. But I feel like, we don't always get to talk about kind of the behind the scenes folks, which I love that everyone kind of chose somebody that was behind the scenes for somebody to highlight in film. And I feel like obviously cinema is all about telling stories, and I think a big part of telling stories is fashion, and I don't feel like it's talked about enough, and it's a very powerful tool for storytelling. I think it can convey a lot of the character's personality and assist with the overall like storytelling of the film. And I feel like a lot of interviews that I watch with actors, like they kind of get into the character with like putting on that hair, makeup, and the costume. And so I think it's a very essential part of film that's not talked about enough. And Edith Head, man, she is so awesome. And it's been great to kind of get to learn about her more recently.
This is another name like I wasn't familiar with, but then as soon as like you look it up and you see the picture and you're right, it's Edna Mode. I'm like, now I know who we're talking about. She didn't just like was nominated a few times. She's like the most celebrated woman in Oscar history, like with 8 Oscars or something like that. So to be so celebrated for your work and so recognized, like she was the person in costuming for this whole studio system for such a long time in this golden age of Hollywood. And when I looked at the dresses and costumes that she worked on, All About Eve, Margot Channing, and that dress there. My all-time favorite film, Breakfast at Tiffany's, that she's done that for. So that iconic black dress, or even just like the pink floaty one. And I agree, Melissa. I think so much about costuming is that visual storytelling, because it's telling you, is the character feeling flirty? Is the character feeling serious at this time? Like it's really just giving you those visual clues. Grace Kelly, one of the most stunning women ever put to film. So to know that Rear Window dress, I've seen the sketches she's done, and when you see fashion designer sketches, I think it really gives you a good sense of who the designer themselves are. I love the way people can draw and sketch and depict people. So when you look at her Grace Kelly sketches, her Elizabeth Taylor sketches, her Betty Davis sketches, they all just look great. Like I would love wall art of her sketches, and I think they ended up selling for a lot of pounds at like British auction is what I just read recently, but that's something new I've just got to start enjoying. I'm definitely going to look into more. Nikki, what do you think about Edith Head?
Similarly, another name I wasn't as familiar with, similarly to you, but again, you look at everything she's done, and for me, maybe less so because I'm not as well versed in older film as I definitely should be. But one that stood out to me was Roman Holiday, which I watched for the first time last year. Which, first of all, magnificent film, but like the cute little number that Audrey wears, like during like the crux of the movie, like and that's the biggest thing is that a lot of things when it comes to costume design, especially like for films that aren't like period pieces, it looks like, oh, it's just clothes. No, because like you were all saying, it informs the characters, and like there could also be like a lot of issues if you pick the wrong piece. Like another scene in that movie is near the beginning when she has to stand like greeting a million people and her foot itches, and like she has to so subtly like take her foot out of her shoe to scratch the back of her leg. And it's like, yeah, like even like something as simple as like a pair of shoes, because it's not just like what aesthetically looks the nicest. Does it make sense for the period, or does it make sense for what the character is going through? Because you think of films, like I said, I think in a lot of people's minds, what constitutes good costume design is what is the most. And it's like, no, not necessarily. I mean, think of something like The Devil Wears Prada, or it's not necessarily like the most. I mean, it's pretty intricate, but it's not like a period piece, but it's like, no, like you have the blue sweater, you have all these elements where it's like, it means something. And if you have something that's out of place, that can be very noticeable. So it's a lot more attention to detail that I think a lot of people can appreciate.
Absolutely. Bridget, what are your thoughts on Edith Head?
Kind of going off of like what Nikki was saying, I took costume design classes in college. We talked a lot about her and her impact in the costume design world. And as someone who's like designed costumes for productions, like the choices that are made are so specific and intentional for each given scene. And the amount of work, and in Edith Head's case, she wasn't just designing the costumes, she was also helping to produce them and make them reality. Which cannot be understated, because the amount of like time and energy that goes into creating a piece. Like, I mean, if you've ever seen Project Runway, it's crazy. And there's so much intention that goes into the creation of a piece. And like we've all been saying, it's not just clothes. It's indicating the emotional state of a character. It's indicating where they are in the world. There are so many things that can be conveyed through a costume alone. And I feel like not enough people are thinking about the importance of those costumes.
We're going to move on to our second prompt we're going to be talking about tonight, which was just as hard to choose just one person. I'm sure we all struggled with this immensely. I've gone for the Disney double feature. I really tried not to, but this character, I've dressed up as her for like when we had book week for the first time. I'm like, this is who I want to be. This is my life goals, is to be Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins is such a well-known, prolific character. It's an iconic character at this point. You know the umbrella, you know the hat. But growing up, this is just one of those ones when I was sick, like I want to throw on Mary Poppins and watch that movie. So like, I feel like she was my nanny to some degree as well. Like Mary Poppins is your friend. But growing up, I always thought she was quite harsh, quite stern, like not super lovely, let the kids all get their way and everything. So it's a little like, wow, they really love Mary. And there's that song Jolly Holiday, you know, it's a jolly holiday with Mary. No wonder it's Mary you love. And then when Bert's like listing off all the women and she just like gets really stern and cross, that's what I like about her. She's not just airy, cute, bubbly, like she gets feisty, and she says, I'm firm but never cross. And I think that is a really good line to hit with Mary. And I've loved her even more since seeing Saving Mr. Banks, because Saving Mr. Banks articulates so well that Mary wasn't there for the children, she's there for the father. And when I rewatch that movie now, I see it so hard. And I really like the interactions between Julie Andrews and David Tomlinson in the film. But Mary as a character is just practically perfect in every way, but I like practically. like it leaves that little bit of room for error. It's something you can aspire to be, but we all know that no one is ever truly perfect. So you can just only be the best you can be. That's what I get from Mary Poppins, and that's why I adore her so much. Bridget, what do you like about Mary Poppins?
Similar to you, Mary Poppins was also a movie that I really enjoyed watching when I was sick. It's just such a charming movie. The music is so fun. It never fails to bring a smile to my face. If I'm in the right state, I'll often cry because it's so sweet. But what I think about is really interesting about the character of Mary Poppins herself is that we do know quite a few details about her, but she's also this like enigma. We don't know that much about her. She's so interesting in her mystery. And I feel like, especially in the time period when Mary Poppins came out, there weren't a lot of like female characters that had that depth to them. Where like, yeah, we know some details. Her name is Mary Poppins. She has a bottomless carpet bag, but also like, what is Mary Poppins? Like, we have no idea. There's so many mysteries about her, and yet she's endlessly fascinating decades later. I'm still thinking about her. And she's just so cool. I love her so much.
Yeah, she just blows in from the west like whenever she's needed. But she knows everyone too. She talks to Andrew. She talks to Andrew the dog. She knows Uncle Albert. And that was the other thing, like that tea scene. I was always, as a kid, like, oh, let them go up on the roof. And now as an adult, I'm like, no, like all those footprints and like just make the tea. Like I empathize a lot more. Hannah, what do you think about Mary Poppins?
Yeah, Mary Poppins is such a great character. I loved the movie as a kid, and then I read the books, and she's so much harsher in the books. Yeah. She's very, very mean in the books, and so I really like that while Julie Andrews hits the kindness a little bit more and is more of a gentle soul, she's still got that firmness. Like the one moment where she just and she threatens to call the police if they don't go to sleep. It's, this moment where she's like, but we will get what we need to get done. I have seen stage versions of Mary Poppins. I directed a stage version of Mary Poppins with children, which was a wild ride. But it's hard to find that balance. It's hard to be firm but not cross, and it's hard to make that in a way that it's lovable. She's not, and not a lot of characters can pull that off. I mean, you go a little too far on the harsh side, and suddenly she's Willy Wonka, and it's just terrifying. And putting these children in genuinely dangerous situations. But the other thing that I love about her is as a person who grew up to then teach theater to kids, I firmly subscribe to her. Make it a game and the kids will have fun with this. and that has turned out to be the most useful piece of advice that I could have taken with me into my theater teaching career. And honestly, a lot of it is Mary Poppins appealed to me because that's how I learn, and now that's how I try to teach others.
Absolutely. Mary Poppins giving out life lessons, like spoonful of sugar will always be a great message. And then you still get to see her fun, whimsical side with supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And I like her friendship with Bert along the way as well. Like, it's,
she knows everyone. She's not like snooty about anybody. Nobody is beneath her. Everybody is worth getting to know and worth treating well.
Absolutely. Melissa, what do you think about Mary Poppins?
I absolutely love Mary Poppins. She was definitely on my list of potential characters to choose. I kind of had a feeling someone might choose her, so I'm so glad that she got chosen. Yeah, she just radiates like positivity, and like I feel like she also was one of the first like positive female like characters I saw on film, and I think that was really impactful seeing as a child growing up, because unfortunately, as y'all probably have seen, I would say generally speaking, there's not really that many great female characters. I mean, there is, but like in the grand scheme of things, like there still needs a lot of improvement, I think. And I just think she's a great example of a female role model. And I don't know, I wanted her to be my mom, like, honestly. But yeah, I feel like I can't really speak more to what everyone else already said, but yeah, she's wonderful.
Nikki, who's your favorite female character?
All right. Hold on. Costume change. All I have to say is It's morphin' time. Pterodactyl. All right. I was going to maybe put this on, but that's probably not a good idea. Okay, so if it's not obvious who I have picked, my selection for my favorite female character is Kimberly Hart, also known as the original Mighty Morphin Pink Power Rangers. Now, just to clarify, I know this is kind of another oddball choice, and I'm like really testing the limits, but she technically has been in a movie as listed below, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie. And also definitely not 2017's Power Rangers, in which the version of that character is not great because she shared a naked photo of her friend without her permission. So let's pretend that version does not exist. Anyway, so with Kimberly Hart, now I'm a newer Power Rangers fan, but from what I've seen is I don't want to say she subverts the Valley Girl trope, because I feel like she actually embodies a lot of it. She is a teenage high school girl who is very feminine. Like, she obviously wears pink all the time. She cares about her appearance. She does gymnastics, like very stereotypically girly. But there is a lot of depth to that. And she embraces like those traits while also embracing a lot of positive traits. She's very hardworking. She's loyal towards her friends. She does a lot of like charity work during the show. She's very kind to everyone. She literally teaches a dance class and learns to sign so she can communicate with a deaf student. Like, that's incredible. And like, and spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen Power Rangers, near the end of her tenure as a ranger, she wants to go off and become a professional gymnast. But like, they have a huge war going on, and she's like torn between whether she's going to do one or the other. And Zordon, who is the mentor character, literally says that he didn't want like all of this to take them away from their regular lives, but she still wanted to make the sacrifice anyway. And like, that speaks a lot to this character. And throughout her run on the show, which is fairly long compared to a lot of the other cast members, is she maintains this truth to herself. She's still a flawed character. Like, she's very sassy, and like, I mean, they have bully characters that deserve it, but like, she'll like snark back at them. But like, there's this feeling of like, it feels so genuine. And like, this is someone that I would actually know in real life. Also, it's just very significant because Power Rangers as a franchise, I think, kind of has this, I don't want to say it's aimed towards guys, but like, it feels kind of masculine in a sense. And for those who aren't familiar, in the original Japanese Super Sentai franchise, on which Power Rangers is based off of, the Pink Ranger is the only female Ranger, which was changed where Yellow is now female as well. But I think that's significant in that like, she has had this much of a cultural impact, and the fact that she embodies these very uber girlish tropes, but is still simultaneously like, she's a badass. Like, she is a badass with her bow and arrow. She actually utilizes her weapon the most effectively of all the Rangers, and she just has this sense of loyalty. Also, Amy Jo Johnson is probably the best actor in that whole freaking series. I'll just say it now.
I love that you got so passionate about it, because as someone who grew up with Power Rangers like in the 90s, like, my most favorite toy was Pink Power Rangers, and you could like flip the button on the back so it would be like Kimberly's head, and then it would flip to the Power Rangers helmet. Like, wore that out. Wow, yes, that thing, exactly. That is amazing.
It's so funny because like her head is right here, and that's her chest.
So when you've been going on your Power Rangers journey, like, it's really been unlocking something inside me. So I couldn't get through it all. I'm halfway through the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, also set in Australia, which you can tell by the accents of some of those people. But the fact that it starts with them skydiving to the Red Hot Chili Peppers cover of Higher Ground, I'm so like, good. Yes, I'm living for this right now. It's 90s, it's camp with the Ivanhoes, and I agree. I really like what you said. It's she gives me prototype Buffy vibes. These are the sorts of characters we were getting at this time, where they are more feminine, traditionally girly characters, but they kick a lot of butt, and she's doing flips and kicks, and she's not just the damsel in distress Daphne Scooby-Doo character. She's contributing to the team and being very proactive, and yes, she's the one that gets taken up by the bird as I'm watching the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, but she's struggling to get back down, and like she doesn't give up, and she's a fighter. And yeah, I really liked the Pink Power Ranger character. Melissa, what are your thoughts on this one?
I don't have too much to say, but I did show this to Nikki before the call started. I have a onesie. But I also was the Pink Power Ranger for about 5 years as a child for Halloween, because I could not, and I would just wear that costume around town because I like wanted to be the Pink Power Ranger when I was a kid. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely more of a nostalgia character for me. I watched the Power Rangers movie not too long ago. It's a good time. I definitely have like my nostalgia goggles on when I'm watching it. But I mean, yeah, I love the character. Like you all have kind of already said, but like she's a badass, but she's still girly, and that's something I kind of identify with. And I just loved seeing that character as a kid, and it was just awesome. Yeah.
I think Nikki really did hit the nail on the head, because like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all 4 boy characters. Like there was no character that we could look at and sort of identify with. So I think this was a really good, big impact for like action female characters being part of a team, being seen, being represented. Bridget, who is your favorite character in the film?
This was a really hard choice to make, but I decided to go down the right of I support women's rights, but I also support women's wrongs. So my character is Cassandra from Promising Young Woman. I am absolutely obsessed with her. I think that Carrie Mulligan did such a good job executing this character. I rewatched the movie recently, and it's something that I wish that I could watch this movie for the first time again, because every single like beat of the movie just like hits so hard. And I think the thing that I found most interesting about her is that she takes on the role of being judge, jury, and executioner in many ways. And I think, and just like the way that she is so clearly right, but also so clearly wrong, because like it's a fundamental way in the fact that like all of these people that she's interacting with have failed her several times over. And just like the elements of betrayal and manipulation, and the way that she utilizes the male gaze in order to get what she wants. And the way that she adopts several personas over the course of the movie, depending on the person that she's interacting with, is so interesting to me. And there are also like several points in the movie where she talks about, like, people ask her like, why are you working in a coffee shop that pays you below minimum wage? You were in medical school. And she's like, I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want the ambition. And I think so often we see women in film, like they're trying to portray this like badass kind of woman, and she's, you know, hashtag girl boss, going for the highest degree possible, going for like this position of power, and she is chosen to stay in a position where she has no power. And I think there's a point in the movie where a customer comes in to interact with her, and she says, I love to be in a customer-facing role. Which is, as somebody who's worked retail in a customer-facing role, like saying that directly to a customer's face, like, whoa, slay, I love it. And just the fact that like ultimately she does get it over on everyone, and her story has a tragic ending, but I think that ultimately it's still like she won in the end, and I think that's so epic.
This is one that I just rewatched for this because it was on my to watch list, but I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to handle it. And it's definitely one, like, it's been for like 4 or 5 days now, and I'm still thinking about it like nearly every day. Like, there's some little facet about it that I'm thinking, because I agree. I like a complex woman. Like, this is like the vengeance path of this, but coming from that place of good. And it made me really question like some of the things that I thought about myself that were okay at the time as well. Because like growing up around the era that these characters would have been in school, like I went to parties and I saw this, like just how much things have changed and progressed, and actually doing something about it. And I think I like what you said, Bridget, how she changes the way she interacts with people, because the person she was sort of aspiring to be really is the Alison Brie character. we see, and the way that those two interact, I find really fascinating throughout the film as well. So this is one I just thought was absolutely fascinating as a character. Melissa, what do you think about Cassandra?
I love her, but I love that she is kind of this morally ambiguous character, because I think that's why people really have kind of passionate feelings about this film one way or the other, because they might have problems with her character or the film, but at the end of the day, I don't really care. I think this film is really important. I can't tell you how much women in this community and outside of this community like talk to me about this film, and I think that says a lot, that this really has stuck with, I think, women specifically who have seen this film. I think it's still important for men to watch it too, but I think it's an important film for women specifically. I think her performance is absolutely captivating. I actually watched this film twice within a few days. The first time I saw it, because I same feeling, like I couldn't not stop thinking about it. I was like, I gotta watch this again. And now it's been like at least a year or so since I've seen it, but it's one I still think of. And I think films that you think about after the fact, as much as this one as an example, I think that kind of speaks for itself, the power of the film. Also, just to shout out, the soundtrack and the color palette of this film is just amazing. Just wanted to mention that. But yeah, I don't think the film would work without Carrie Mulligan's performance in this. And I love this choice, Bridget. So good job.
Nikki, what are your thoughts on Cassandra?
Do you know what a woman's worst nightmare is? That line gutted me when I watched that trailer for the first time, because I'll just fully admit this at the risk of sounding bad. When I first saw the trailer, I was like, to me, it was like super intense. And I was like, oh my God. Like I was like, my mind went in the direction of like, oh, she's like, what's she doing? Like, this seems like too much. And then it's like, I'm re-examining my own like assumptions about it. And then actually watching the movie, it's like, I agree. She's definitely, there is moral ambiguity in terms of what she's doing, but kind of like we were talking about, like with the way flawed women are written, it's like, I also completely understand. Like if I was in that position, I would, whether or not I would do it, I would certainly think about it. And I think that's just what makes it so fascinating is, and like you all said, like with Carrie Mulligan is just absolutely perfect in this role, because she says everything like with the utmost sincerity. She like the way she just kind of smooth talks everyone, but then you also see her break down when like it gets too much for her. Like the scene with her and Molly Shannon is like a huge heartbreaker to me, when she tells her like sincerely, like, please stop doing this, because you see like that side of her that isn't putting on like kind of the front or the character, but at the same time she knows like what she feels she has to do and maintaining that to get what she is like, what she's searching for. And I mean, like you brought up the color palette, that like props to like the set designer and everyone who worked on that, like that contrast of this bubblegum pop, like kind of aesthetic to it with such dark material, I think like just further emphasizes like we have kind of these assumptions of like, oh, what kind of person she's going to be, like, oh, like you said, like, is she the bubbly Alison Brie who's like just going to brunches and having mimosas and, oh, I'm a doctor, like, look how great everything is. Oh, hell no. It's not like that at all. And like, and even like for a character like her, like you also like to some extent, everyone in this movie is wearing a mask. Everyone is hiding like their actual feelings. And in a sense, she's the only one ballsy enough to actually, to some extent, be freaking honest about it. But we still look down upon it because like, oh, that makes me uncomfortable. But it's like, that's the point though. So honestly, like, fantastic character. My favorite movie of 2020. What was so funny to me is at the height of when COVID had started and all the movies were being released digitally to rent for like $20. That was the only movie that broke me. It's like, okay, I'm going to spend the $20 on this. And it was well worth it.
Love it. Hannah, who's your favorite female character?
For a much less morally ambiguous character and a lot perkier. My character on the flip side is Tracy Turnblad from all iterations of Hairspray, the original in 1988 and the stage version and the 2007 version, which is my personal favorite, but one of my favorite characters. There were so many that I debated for this. Like you said, it was so difficult to choose, and I debated, do I go with a Norma Desmond, a villainous character? And I was like, you know what? This is the character who I come back to over and over again. We so rarely get to, for one thing, we so rarely get to see the plus size girl get the hot guy. We never see her be good at physical activity. She is Tracy Turnblad is an amazing dancer. That's like her entire story. And very rarely in the story do they actually make her weight the center of the issue. Like there's at the very beginning, the popular girls make some kind of joke about it, and she's just like, whatever, it just keeps going. And it doesn't become the main part of her personality. She has so much else going on. She is perky and excited and enthusiastic and very passionate about equality. And when she sees somebody else come up with something where she's like, well, that's not right, I have to stand up and fix that, she goes for it. She's like, what can I do to make this happen? And one of the things that I really love about her as well is that even while it doesn't really get into her own weight story, it does get into her mom's a little bit. And she's actually the one to kind of push her mom out of this. And for me, Tracy is like the as somebody who works a lot with teenagers, I see in a lot of them this sort of, I see a similar sort of refusal to give in to the traumatic baggage that society has placed on their parents and being like, no, I'm not going to deal with that. And so a lot of them are in a position where they're able to be the Tracy to other people who have more sitting on them, who had more things that they've internalized. And there are times where Tracy Turnblad is really like an aspirational figure for me in how fiercely she loves and how hard she fights and how much she's like, I'm not going to let things let me down, and how she feels all her feelings. When she's sad, she's very sad, and when she's happy, she's very happy. And she can be equally happy about something light and fluffy like having a crush on a guy who said hello to her in the hallway, and bring just that much passion to something really big and important like fighting for racial equality in her town. And so I love Tracy so much. She's just one of the Hairspray 2007 is one of my go-to comfort movies, and Tracy is a huge part of it. If Tracy was not such a beautiful, wonderful character of just radiating joy out of that screen, like I watched it and I'm like, I want to be this person. I want to be her so badly. And so yeah, I was like, you know what, I gotta choose the one who brings me. Nicole Holofcener is for thinking and for flawed women, and Tracy Turnblad is just like, no, this is my role model. I want to be Tracy.
My face hurts from smiling so much from just like that whole explanation, because the way you're describing it is just the way like she makes me feel as well. Absolutely. I've seen the John Waters, Ricky Lake Hairspray, but I too am also much more familiar with the 2007 version, and I love it as you're picking up the different points. I'm like, oh yep, that's I Can Hear the Bells, that's Hey Mama, Welcome to the 60s, that's I Know, I'm matching all the songs. And I love how you said she's the best of dancing, and she goes and she gets it, and nothing's going to stop her. And just like, yeah, I'm going to go for it. Just that exuberance and that tenacity is just so great. And she's never cruel. She never puts anyone else down. She just wins the day with her great attitude. And it's just such a pleasure to see. And as you said, like being able to fight for other people straight away, it's like, well, that's not right. Like, and we're going to do something about it. I'm in March, and we should all be together and going to detention, and like it's great. I just love the actions that she takes. She takes this positive attitude and turns it into actions, and it's just so great to see. Nikki, what do you think about Tracy Turnblad?
Oh my gosh, I'm just so happy because like this is easily one of my favorite movie musicals, and I didn't realize like just what a following it had developed. And I mean, like y'all said, it's very largely because of how great Tracy is. Shout out to Nikki Blonsky, who like should have been way freaking bigger, because I think her portrayal like it has a lot to do with it. and we were talking like earlier about like relating to like teenage girl characters, and she's like that kind. I would say partly I kind of wish I was more like her in that she had this unfailing optimism, but like also was like so sincere in her desire for good in the world. Like just the sincere way she says, "I'm all for integration. It's the new frontier." Like it's so wonderful. Like, but at the same time, like she has a little bit of snark at times. Like, hey, she knows like what's going on with Amber and like all those like kids with attitude. Like, and speaking of which, definitely, I haven't watched the '88 version in a while, but like, and then that's even like amplified. But you know what? She's still right, and that's like a whole like different vibe in itself, but still great in its own regard. But no, absolutely a character who is absolutely fantastic. And again, I think in a lot of ways something to aspire to, in that she like has this optimism, like in a sense, kind of as maturity in how she saw the world in the freaking 60s at the time, no less. But it's still like a very relatable. Like you said, she has like the crush, like what, like a scene that like I just can't get out of my head is when she's in the detention and she's like, "Yeah, I'm a bad girl who needs to be punished," and smacks her ass, and then her crush like walks by as she does it, and it's such a cliche scene, but it still works so well. And then thankfully, like is nice about it, but. Like just like you said, without her, like the whole musical kind of falls apart because everyone else around her like is varying levels of dickishness. But like as a package, it just works so well.
Melissa, who is your favorite female character?
Impossible answer, but for the show, I chose Clarice Starling from Silence of the Lambs. This was very hard to choose a character again, by the way. But I went with a character that I have loved for a very long time. And I also wanted to shout out some kind of horror aspect in this episode because I'm a big horror person. So I saw Silence of the Lambs for the first time when I was probably around like 12 or 13 years old. And I left the film weirdly feeling just like it felt personal to me in a way. I don't know. She's just somebody I've always has inspired me, and I just always really saw her as a hero and someone to look up to when I was growing up. She comes from a troubled past, and she overcomes that throughout the story. I love that her arc through the film, and she's like the ultimate underdog in this story, and they really emphasize that the way that they film her. They really emphasize how small she is, and they definitely like film it from like her point of view so that everyone kind of looks bigger. They really emphasize how like male dominated her world is, and I think that kind of speaks to just, I don't know, being a woman in the world too. I think just the power struggle with female and males. But like a specific scene that I really like is when she's in the elevator and she's like so small and there's all these men around her. And it's just, again, just emphasizing how small she is throughout the film. But I do think her, ultimately, like her strengths are her heart and her vulnerability, and she has this awareness of how women walk in the world, and I think that's what ultimately helps kind of find Buffalo Bill. I think using her female perspective and maybe looking at things through the female lens to try to through the victim's eyes too. Like she has that that empathy, to the victim specifically because she is a woman, and kind of knows what it might. I don't know. I just feel like in society, like as women, like we, we're more susceptible to violence against from men, and so I think that just has that awareness a little bit. And yeah, I love her ambition, her quiet strength, her intelligence is very emphasized in the film, and I just think she's a great character of like female empowerment.
What an absolutely inspirational and aspirational female character. You know, this inspired women to go into further FBI work and police work, because you're being able to look at it on screen and be like, yes, she can do it. And she is working her way through that male-dominated world. And that's such a strength to Jodie Foster for being serious, not boring, not harsh, like really showing all those different facets of Clarice. And yeah, absolutely, that she is smart, she is competent, but she's not flawless. She knows when she needs help. The scenes with her and Hannibal Lecter, like that could be such, if you don't have the right actress understanding that character to the core, they get overridden with those scenes, because Anthony Hopkins is like that, like going 1,000, like he's nailing it. So you need to have that dynamic between the two. And I really like how much you said, like how she feels small as a person. So to see that growth and that competency and everything come through, I think this is just a really integral and important female character on film. Bridget, what do you think about Clarice Starling?
Kind of like you were saying, it takes a powerhouse of an actress to act alongside Anthony Hopkins, and Jodie Foster really brought it. She's one of the most iconic characters in horror. She's legendary, and I think, like Melissa was saying, she maintains that femininity that in a lot of like horror that features female characters, I feel like the ones that last the longest often have the more masculine traits, but they kept Clarice very feminine and like emphasized she is smart, she is strong, she has like power in these cases, and she's a woman. Like there's no, like she's not a tomboy, she's a woman, and she's making her way in this story, and she is, you know, she's at all the turning points, she's there like making strides in this. And I think that Jodie Foster really like knocked it out of the park. I feel like there isn't really any other actors that could have done it like she did.
Hannah, what are your thoughts on Clarice Starling?
Yeah, just to add to all that, like looking at how the movie frames her as a woman in this world where there are not a lot of other women involved in this, and especially in the scenes where she is with Hannibal Lecter, her femininity is so important there, because it's so much like as he's playing mind games with her and trying to rattle her and make her feel vulnerable and small. Like sure, she does, like, because he is good at that, but she's also like, you can tell that she is felt vulnerable and small in many, many, many situations on a daily basis in her job. And her job is to push through it and to be like, whatever, this is not going to be affecting me right now. And so you can see like how that you can, like, in the way that the other men in the department treat her, you can see her taking that and using that as it makes her more prepared for when Lecter tries to get inside her head. It makes her more able to not slide it off, but to be like, okay, this is what I know, this person's playing mind games with me. This happens to me. People are always going to find ways to make these little digs at me and try to get under my skin. And just like I do with everything else in my job, I'm going to have to find a way to move past it, because I'm not going to make them change and I still have to do my job. And that's such an important and I think vital element that gives those scenes such a unique feel to them. Like it's, Hannibal Lecter is, turned up to 10 in terms of evil manipulation. But it for me, it draws such a strong parallel between the subtler moments of sexism and undermining and mind games that you see her get from her male partners and coworkers throughout the entire film. And I think it's so beautifully just that those two parallels are drawn just so beautifully with there. And Jodie Foster, obviously, like we've all said, knocks it out of the park and is so amazing in this.
That's going to wrap up our Women in Film panel. I just want to say the biggest thank you to everyone who participated here today. Ladies, you are amazing. Thank you for giving us your time, your insights. Go follow them, follow their projects, follow them on Letterboxd. Let our voice be heard out there. This is dropping on International Women's Day, so happy International Women's Day to you all, and thank you all.